money is the game everybody plays. It's like, regardless of if you want to pretend like you're playing the game, you're in the game. There isn't some other alpha asset class that's like outperforming Bitcoin, making Bitcoin a bad investment on a relative scale. Bitcoin's the investment that puts everything else to shame. It's literally the apex predator. If Bitcoin only tripled, it would be the smallest return that we've ever seen in a log chart breakout.
Bitcoin is worthless artificial gold.
Your ATM is safe, your banks are safe, there's enough cash in the financial system, and there is an infinite amount of cash at the Federal Reserve.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. Take the orange pill, and we'll show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
All right, guys, welcome back to Orange Pill Docs, the Bitcoin Fellowship. We're here with Ryan Hogue for episode 12. We had to title this one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin after the dump yesterday, that flash liquidation, the largest crypto liquidation in history. You get background on Ryan. He's an entrepreneur, educator, content creator. He's all involved in the e-commerce space. And as his side hustles has grown, he's been able to focus on passive income channels to serve as his primary income source. And we're hoping that Ryan can kind of talk to some of the docs on our channel to do the same. Ryan's also a big Bitcoin bull, strategy bull, and posts regularly on X with some technical analysis on Bitcoin price action. I'm looking forward to and excited to hear the advice that Ryan can give other medical professionals and high earners who often don't know how to put their money to work for them. So Ryan, let's just go ahead and let you get carried away with it. You want to tell us a little bit about your background and how you kind of got started?
Yeah, and thanks for the invite, Adam and Chris. I respect that you guys have a Bitcoin podcast for medical professionals. It's probably a rare thing in the space, but it'll probably become more and more prominent as Bitcoin matures, which is funny because like, how long has Bitcoin been around? And we're still talking about like the future of Bitcoin and how it's going to get more and more popular. Yeah, so my background, I guess, went to school, had no clue what I was going to do with my life. My parents, I used to be a big computer nerd. My parents were like, hey, you're a computer nerd, study IT. Done. I ended up becoming a web developer because I saw like, you can do a lot with that, being able to build websites. At the point in that time, like 2007, I think, when I made that decision, kind of like skating where the puck is going. Although nowadays you don't even need to be able to program to be able to build websites because AI can do it for you. So I was glad I kind of got out of that when I did. But I did that for 8 years, learned about Bitcoin while I was working 9 to 5 as a web developer. Honestly, like I had a lot of spare time. That was the cool thing about that job was I'm at a computer all day, which some people might hate, but like I was cool with it. So any spare time I had, I was basically trying to build my income because the way I saw it was I'm at this job that I'd rather not be at, honestly. So I might as well make as much money as I can through side hustles and whatnot. And ended up, honestly, I've got my Reddit Bitcoin shirt with the magic internet money through browsing Reddit. I think learned about Bitcoin, learned about Dogecoin on the same day, I think, if I remember correctly, and ended up reading like the whole Bitcoin white paper while I was on the job, and really just didn't understand it, even as like somebody with a technical background that could program, like still had no clue what all this meant. And even in 2025, that was 2014, 11 years later, I'm still kind of understanding like what kind of role Bitcoin can play in the world today and in the future.
That's awesome. I think that's interesting that the fact that you had a tech background and able to look into all this and still not able to understand it. I feel like that's part of the whole orange pill process is that like, if somebody in tech doesn't understand it when they first read it, how do we expect like the average layperson to understand it? So that's, it takes several times to finally take the orange pill and to just get it and for that, click to finally happen.
Can I share like one of the things I think is the coolest maybe use case for Bitcoin that I've heard of recently, and then maybe ask you guys what you think is the coolest thing about Bitcoin?
Absolutely, man.
So there was I think it was on the What Bitcoin Did podcast. Somebody came and talked about using Bitcoin and the like runes, basically like the extra kind of bloatware that a lot of people are against that you can put into Bitcoin, inscriptions, I guess they're called, and basically using it to store hashes like of data, like of large data sets. So you know how like history is some people would say history is his story, and you don't know if you're getting like necessarily the full objective truth for things that have happened in the past. Well, I guess this doesn't necessarily prove something to be true, but if you have kind of a trusted source, you can put together like theoretically like large data sets, and you can store the hash of that data set. So you don't have to put the whole data set on the Bitcoin blockchain, but you can store the hash value of it on the blockchain. It's immutable. It's there forever. And then if anybody tinkers with that data set later, the hash is going to be different. So it's almost like helping us preserve the reality of today. If anybody's like a long-term thinker, to me, that's like millennia. It's cool to think that like we could theoretically be a little bit like censorship resistant on that level.
Absolutely. That's neat. I hadn't even heard of that. I think the use case I had heard, I'm sure many people had heard of this, so it's not like unique, but around the time that the Ukraine-Russia war started breaking out, there were some people on both sides that actually like didn't believe in it either, fighting, and they just wanted to get out of there. So a lot of them put their net worth into Bitcoin and just left, moved, across the world, and then downloaded their wealth and just started somewhere else. I thought that was so neat because that's part of it when I'm trying to orange pill some of the older guys who don't understand that like it's really freedom money and it gives you the opportunity to just, that's what money should be, right? The ability to just like start over and plant somebody new somewhere new. I thought that was, where else can you do that? You can't do that with gold. You can't do that with like, a bank account.
Yeah, I think Bitcoin is like misunderstood. And even by like me, who's been thinking about it now for, I guess you could say, over 11 years since I read the white paper, it's almost like divine in terms of like the technology. I hate to say that because then it's like, oh, he's one of these guys like Maxi big time.
Yeah.
But like for real, because what you just said is true, but we think about it through the lens. I think most people think about it through the lens of like our understanding of it, which is based solely on like physical, tangible things like gold,
Yeah.
which I'm not like anti-gold. I have gold, you know what I mean? Whatever. But I think of gold as like a hedge against the debasement of US dollars. I don't think of gold as like something like I literally, when last time I was in the airport, like 2 weeks ago, I was asking the security people like, hey, if I had a like 10 gold coins on me, like, would that be a problem? Would that set off an alarm? And he said, it depends if you're like going or leaving, like if you're coming or going, and it's just like in my mind, I'm like, okay, so if I have like a Bitcoin seed phrase in my head, I could store any amount of wealth basically.
And that's also subjective too. It probably depends on who the TSA guy is, right? Like there's so many variables in that whole equation. Like you just don't even want to take, we've all experienced that, right? Where somebody gives you a hard time over nothing in one of those lines.
For your money.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned the kind of from the divine aspect. I was listening to the Matthew Pine's most recent podcast with Natalie Brunell, and I've heard this a couple times, but I think he did an eloquent way of kind of talking about like, well, if I wanted like he was talking about UFOs and he was talking about kind of the future and what he saw, and they were getting into that aspect of the conversation. And then he started talking about how like, well, if I was going to go, from the future, be from the future, I would have developed Bitcoin and then come back and made sure that it like succeeded so that all these other variables were controlled for and got better. I thought that was a very interesting take. Is like, if we had our future selves, would they make sure Bitcoin succeeded in this timeline so that everything else could be built on top of it, especially going into like the AI transformation? I know I sound super skeptical, like repeating that, but it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, I don't know. I've read the book, the Roger Ver book, Hijacking Bitcoin. And so like just me being full transparency, like everything that you kind of learn from that book, in case you weren't like following it every day, like, I think like that's kind of a nerdy thing to do. No offense to anybody. Like I'm a computer nerd who spends 10, 12 hours a day at a computer, but like I'm not following that every day. So that book was good to just summarize everything. It really does feel like Bitcoin Core is more interested in like Bitcoin being the ultimate hedge against debasement of fiat currencies than they are concerned about it being like transactional, base layer of money where me and you are like sending each other coffee money via the Bitcoin network. Just being honest. And
Yeah,
I think maybe this stuff, there's always like room for it to mature. And there could be like layer 2 technologies, Lightning Network, etc. But at a minimum, at least it's still better to have the use cases that we talked about in terms of like preserving our buying power and, being able to like bring it just using a seed phrase anywhere in the world.
absolutely. Well, you talked about a little bit about getting into Bitcoin. When did you get into strategy?
For me, like 2020 was when I initially learned about it and thought like, oh man, we should like full port into strategy, but I just didn't do it. Honestly, like back then, I mean, I'm still doing it today, but my main position in 2020 was buying Bitcoin. That's when I first like started like really accumulating heavily, at some point between the COVID low and the real like kind of breakout. So you could say between like maybe 5K and like 15K was when I was buying a lot, 20K even. And then I remember learning about Tether's role in Bitcoin's price appreciation and freaking out and selling all my Bitcoin one day at a nice gain. You know what I mean? So no complaints, but like, I remember just like learning about it and then reading more and more and more and more and more about it and being like, yo, they could rug everything to zero overnight, which I guess technically still could happen, but I think like we're well past that, like I guess I call it like studying how the world really works. Like when you kind of study how the world really works, you're like, oh, Tether has a massive role to play in the appreciation of Bitcoin, but they're just like, playing their part in this game. Like they're just a puzzle piece in the grand scheme. And now you see like a pro Bitcoin president who's got, Howard Lutnick, who I'm pretty sure like all of Tether's treasuries are like in his name, I've heard. You know what I mean? So it's all just kind of like they're all interconnected now. They're all serving each other's interests. And you don't have to worry about Tether rugging Bitcoin. Essentially, they created like almost like a recursive loop of like, hey, give us dollars, we'll buy treasuries, we'll issue you stable coins that exchanges are accepting to help you pump a crypto bubble. And kind of a separate topic or almost kind of similar topic in that, to me, it reminds me of banks and how traditional finance banks works, right? You give them a deposit, they buy a treasury, and they'll tell you that you have this number in database that's just a number on a screen, right? But they've already like backdoored your money to the treasuries, and yeah, and you're an unsolicited creditor to the bank. Good luck. Hopefully they don't go under.
Well, that's almost how you have to paint it, right? I know when I'm in the OR and somehow I get Bitcoin to come up, you almost have to explain the problem first, right? Because you can't just like paint. It's like anything else. You can't just give somebody a solution if they don't understand the problem. So I think the Monopoly example is always a good one, right? Where like you don't go around the Monopoly board and not buy anything. You don't just like keep trying to collect the Go $200 without while everybody else is buying the assets that are appreciating. I think sometimes that helps like the common person. I'm like, that's exactly what's happening, and they just put more money. The banker just puts more money in the system out of nothing.
Yeah, it's an interesting time to be alive for sure. Like, I don't know if this is like a new thing or if it's just everybody gets orange pilled, let's say. And then you kind of look around and you're like, doesn't everybody else see it? And whether or not they see it, they feel it. That's the funny thing about this game. Like I have some like monikers or sayings that like have just popped into my mind as I go through my journey. One of them is that like money is the game everybody plays. It's like regardless of if you want to pretend like you're playing the game, you're in the game and it's happening around you, and you can either like acknowledge it and try to like there's two ways to I think play it, and the third option is just not play it and get wrecked. But like you can play it and try to keep up with inflation, which to me is like dumping your money in the S&P, the SPY ETF, which is, by the way, you're going to crush on a relative basis. If you do that, you'll outperform most investors. Like I've heard dead people are like the best investors because they just keep their money perm along the major indices. And it's like, you can see why, if you get actively trading and you get wrecked like on a day like yesterday,
Yeah.
most people have trouble with that like inverse psychology. Like, oh no, on days like that, you got to be aggressive, anyways. And then, yeah, the third option, their second option, I guess, is to try to like outperform, generate alpha against the baseline. Now, if you go CPI inflation, your baseline is very low, but I don't believe in that as like my marker for inflation. Like to me, inflation is just whatever the S&P's annual returns are, which have dramatically accelerated since 2020. So to me, to generate alpha, you need to be in Bitcoin or like more risk assets. But again, it's like, is Bitcoin really that much of a risk asset? If you look at it, I know on a day like yesterday, they're like, yes, Ryan, it is. But I mean, honestly though, like I think of Bitcoin as a technology that is like objective, like it's objectively true. Like to me, the Bitcoin network is where it derives its value in like a tangible sense, in something that can be quantified. So it's like, did the Bitcoin network go away yesterday? No, it's still just as strong as ever. Okay, cool. So Bitcoin's going to be around and you got an opportunity to buy it low. When I was accumulating the most of my Bitcoin, like I loved every down day. I loved it. I was like happy, I was like the guy watching when Bitcoin search interest drops to like nothing on Google Trends. Like I'm like the guy still watching Bitcoin videos. Not that I needed it because I was like, okay, I've been studying it for 10 years at that point, or not. I guess I'm thinking more like 2022, the bottoms 2023. But I'm doing it just to like give myself like a reminder. Hey, like keep your eye on the prize, the long-term goal. And I just accumulated through all the dips. And now that we're up high, it's like, am I planning on selling? No, like I have a long-term perspective, and those dips were a blessing, just like yesterday was.
Yeah, once you understand it, you're able to counter trade your emotions, right? Once you understand the value, then that's when that switch hits, and it's like, okay, I need to have a little bit set aside so that I can start buying dips, and then you look forward to those dips. So like our group chat yesterday was blowing up a little bit because we have a couple buddies that just got into it, and they're giving Chris and me a hard time that like they bought at 100. We finally got them to buy at like 100,000, and they were up to like they were happy at 120. Now we're back to 110. He's like, "What'd you guys do?" I was like, "This is another one of those days where I told you need to put more in." But yeah, you were getting back to, kind of what money is. And I think it's just like the social covenant of society. It's like a core tenet of society, right? This whole idea that like for society to exist, you have to have people doing different jobs and you have to have some meaningful exchange of goods. You don't want to have like a bartering system. We wouldn't be able to build society and build technology on top of that. So I think some people forget, right? We're just born into this system of like fiat money and that this is the way it's been, my dad and his dad knew what a dollar bill was, and that's what we exchanged goods, and nobody questions that. And so that's, I think, why Bitcoiners are able to find their way into having that be part of all the conversations now. Is like, if you talk about anything that's broken in society, you can inevitably track it back to the money, with fiat being the big issue, the printing of the money, of the, printing something that's supposed to be valuable at, that's actually not valuable in exchange for something of value of your time. So
yeah, it's that's like one of the most high IQ discussions you could have. It's just like systemic like thinking,
yeah, absolutely.
I think the most scarce asset as an individual is your time, and money represents your exchange with society for that time, right? Like you put in time to hopefully make your community better with whatever you do for your job. And in exchange, you get money. And then by debasing that money, then that's the other side breaking that contract with you. I think is if you get like fundamental and like real philosophical and meta about it.
Well,
I agree.
Kind of flipping it a little bit, what do you guys think about our strategic Argentinian peso reserve?
Is that a thing?
Was it 20 billion that we bought? 20 billion just loaded in. That would be 165,000 Bitcoin at the price that the day that they bought those pesos.
I don't know
That just shows
if we
you.
own the pesos as much as it was just a swap line to like give them liquidity to get out of whatever funk they are. Every time I see one of those, I'm like, okay, what rare earth minerals or how much gold or whatever or oil does that country have? Argentina has things like that. I don't know what the next step of that trade. I don't even think it's a trade. I think it's probably a contagion putting the fire out before we even realize that it would have been a fire, but we'll see.
Well, doesn't that just reaffirm the whole thesis that they'll print money to make sure the system doesn't go down? Like if they can just
100%.
give $20 billion, like when we got people struggling here.
Yeah, I mean, it's and the whole system's digitized now. So print money is even like a weird thing to say because it's like how many times you need to tap 0 on the keyboard, you know what I mean? And then it's done. And
add to
then
zero.
you get the helicopter money, it gets pumped out to the
Yeah.
top. Like I live near Washington DC. I don't know. It's almost like hijacking the conversation to say this, but it's like I try so hard to like run my own business, to like from nothing to go from like concept to like actually starting a functioning business that like produces things in this real world, and then it like gives me a little bit of profit on the side. But if I like drive down the street, I live near like the strategy headquarters, and guess what? They're surrounded by a bunch of defense contractors, and it's like I'm not trying to say that everything is a scam or whatever, but it's like most defense contractors, their client, you could say they have clients, but really their client is the government, right? And the government is I just call it the infinite money printer, and it's like that just exacerbates the problem of the currency debasement because the government's never going to run out of money, and they create an incentive for you to spend all the money they give you. So it's like I've got plenty of friends here who work for these companies who literally will tell me that there's employees on the payroll who do nothing, that are like the definition of the word incompetent, but by them being on the payroll, their boss gets more money, their boss's boss gets more money because it justifies a bigger contract. So it's like they're better off being on the payroll doing nothing than, it's just one of these weird things. It's a broken system. Like you were saying, system thinking. Like Jeff Booth's the best guy who introduced that concept into my mind of just like, hey guys, you're evaluating the broken system from within the broken system. Did you ever think that things didn't have to be this way?
Yeah, that kind of warped my brain when I first heard him say that, but he's right. I mean, everything is so centralized now. Like you were talking about, like everything is just becoming like a monopoly. We see that in the healthcare system. Like Chris and I coming out of residency, it's so hard to join like an independent anesthesia group nowadays because all of the small anesthesia groups have been bought up by these big private equity firms. And so like you can't compete. You can't go like start your own anesthesia business, even though you have this skill set. And I'm sure you would be just as great as an anesthesiologist because they have basically a monopoly on the system with all the hospitals and the surgeons.
It's a much harder road is what I'll say. And, even the FTC is investigating companies for monopoly type tactics. And it's been interesting to see how it plays out and what they end up defining that in me and Adam's world of healthcare.
Well,
they don't enforce antitrust like laws. They stopped doing that, like, I feel like decades ago, right? And it's not like unique to healthcare, even though it might be bad there. It's like, if you kind of like pay attention, it's everywhere. And then what's even funnier about like the concept of monopolies is if you go to like Yahoo Finance and type in any stock with a market cap above like $1 billion, you're going to see the same institutional holders under the tab of like institutional holders. Basically, it's the same people that own all of them anyways. So it's like, oh, Coke versus Pepsi. Nope. Behind the scenes, they're owned by the same people. Nobody cares. It's like, there's a bigger monopoly. Like everything's just that whole everything is a hierarchical control structure. It's funny because I can sit down with you guys. You guys get it.
Yeah. 100%.
But man, like nobody else gets that, or nobody else cares to think about it, I guess. They'll just play their part and then watch Netflix, which is fine. Like we're all going to die one day anyways. So whatever makes you happy. But
yeah, they think you're crazy when you start talking about, like all of these are the same brands and you go down the rabbit hole at the grocery store,
Yeah, I did a YouTube video on that like a couple years back, and it had like, this was like on my finance channel that had no subscribers, the same one that I post to today, and it got like 50,000 views right away because it was like interesting to people. They were like, "Wait, what? Is that actually true?" It's like, "Yep, here's how you check."
Yeah. Yeah, we need decentralization, right? That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, I think the centralization though is a feature, not not a bug. You know what I mean? Like again, if you kind of study how the world really works, we've been trending towards this, and not to again hijack the conversation, but it's like, vehicles like Google, for instance. Has anybody noticed the internet feels really centralized over the past few years? Like, you think that's random? That nobody goes to like random web forums to have discussions anymore? It's like, no, it must be on Meta. It must be on these controlled platforms. They're where you're allowed to have discourse. It's like Google search just changes their results on the top of page one, and all of a sudden the internet becomes completely centralized because everybody still uses Google. It's a convenience thing.
Yeah. Well, listen to all the, like Zuckerberg and all those guys talk about what they were going through with the Biden administration during COVID. And they're talking about how like they had to censor certain things. It's like supposed to be the freedom of speech on those platforms. And then we get into why Musk bought Twitter and made it X. It's just very interesting, this whole timeline that we're living through and how Bitcoin plays into this and AI plays into this. It's like everything's happening at once,
So can I give you a good one? Like, what does Zuckerberg and Meta, Sergey Brin and Google, and Elon Musk have in common with Jeff Bezos' grandpa? Anybody? Do you guys know the answer?
I don't know the answer to this.
DARPA beginnings. Jeff Bezos' grandpa was the top guy at ARPANET, which was the predecessor to DARPA. So, I mean, unless you believe in coincidences, again, this is where my friends would look at me like with eyes glazed over, like, what does this mean? You know what I mean? Like, are you a conspiracy theorist? Like, I state a fact that you can go verify. And they look at me like I'm crazy for stating a fact because it's outside the narrative that when they watched a device called a vision that nobody shared with them. It's like, wow, you would think that they would share that.
I know that glazed look too well, unfortunately. I mean, you can go back to, there's so many of those, right? Think about the Federal Reserve and the Titanic. I'm sure you've heard that one.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's just a lot of coincidences. Leave it at that.
Yeah. And they knew what they were doing. I love the beginning of the Creature of Jekyll Island, where they all kind of take the train down to Georgia. But when they did it, they used pseudonyms and stuff so that they could travel unbeknownst to other people, because even at that time, their last names garnered attention. So they were doing it literally under fake names to get down to Georgia from, I'm sure, probably New York and whatnot, upper East Coast. And and then we all know what came next. You know what I mean? Basically the foundation of the Federal Reserve. Then they paid news outlets to paint it like it was a bad thing, so that it was the inverse psychology, basically exactly what happens today, basically all the time if you watch mainstream news, where it was inverse psychology. So everybody's like, yeah, anti that. So they got exactly what they wanted at basically the expense of the people, the common folk. This is 100 years later we're talking about this. And I mean, and then of course the Titanic, where the people who maybe were against it, well, they met an unfortunate demise.
Yeah,
coincidence
right.
though.
It sounds like we need a conspiracy theory episode. That would be a fun one.
Yeah, when does the conspiracy theory start, though?
That's right. That's a good question.
Coincidence theory would be the name of the episode.
I love it. Well, Ryan, do you want to take over and just kind of do some strategy analysis, some Bitcoin analysis, especially with all the stuff? Hopefully bring some hopium back to the market.
Yeah, let's do it. This is my specialty. I always like to start with Bitcoin. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I like to start with this chart on Bitcoin. Oh, okay. This chart is my favorite. Basically, this is my favorite chart for Bitcoin, though, to start with. And to me, this illustrates that, I mean, we all know Bitcoin has basically gone up and to the right when you price it in US dollars since its inception. So that's not some groundbreaking take. But what this chart shows to me is you can almost predict when you get the explosive vertical moves in Bitcoin. Or at least maybe you can't predict it. That might be the wrong verbiage, but it's that there's clues when it's going to happen. And I call it level jumping. And I'm the only person I know that has this chart, that made this chart. So I want to kind of just walk you through it really quickly. These white lines and the angle that their angle of kind of incline, I've basically just duplicated them and applied it to Bitcoin in the past. And what I've noticed is every time you break through one of these white lines, you get massive rapid appreciation. So the first one happened in January of 2013. And within 12 weeks, you got a 1,600% appreciation on Bitcoin. So you went from let's see, $15, I think, $15 up to 259. And you actually had two breakouts that year. So you had another one right here, where in 4 weeks, it went up 320%. Then it spent let's see. It spent 187 weeks, so 3 years before it happened again. And then in 2017, it happened again right here. And this was honestly 2017, by the way, is the most similar to what we're experiencing in 2025. And I can come back to this maybe, but it didn't just go up, like it didn't make it easy. It didn't just go straight up like a rocket ship. It went up, it came back down, it went up, it came back down again, and then it blasted off. So they made it a little bit harder in 2017. But if you were able to sit through that, you were rewarded with, basically, if you bought on the final backtest, you were rewarded with a 625% return in 19 weeks. And then there was another one right here in 2020. This was the most recent one. And I think we're working on a breakout currently right now, even after yesterday's price action. In 2020, you got this breakout. It appreciated 275%, which is like a 3.75x from the breakout level in 21 weeks. And that was the first top. So that's not going out to the second top. And so to walk you through this logic, and I mean, honestly too, like, just to point out, like these levels, they do kind of leave clues for like what might have made a good entry. Like for instance, I just shared the 2020 breakout data with you, but you could have bought like the COVID backtest right here. Like if you were essentially buying right there off that earlier breakout level from 2017, you would have got in at like 3,800. Funny story too there, man. Like this kills me. I was at like the bank with my parents back then because they were like, yo, you have too much money. You need to like put it in this 5% CD. And while I'm sitting there, I'm literally looking at them and the guy at the bank, and I'm like, Bitcoin's below $4,000. I should buy Bitcoin, and didn't do it. Actually, no, it wasn't in March 2020. I'm lying. It was here. It was back here in 2018. Still though. So yeah, I could have had like, I don't know, like 15 Bitcoin that day or something. And instead now I got 0 and I got 5% return on my USD.
Congrats. You're only down 5%.
Yeah. Yep. So anyways, what we're working on now, let's fast forward. This is where we're at today. Like, and just so you know, like these lines, like I am trying to predict the future with these lines, but let me just walk you through why. Like this is that same white line, same angle of incline that's worked in the past, and it extends from 65K. And if you guys know when we had the double top here that went to 69K, like if this was to break through this log breakout level, it would have only had room to run to like maybe 80K. So it made sense that it got rejected. And there's also another indicator I use that, like, I mean, no one needs to like write this down or pay attention, but like I have these yellow dots, and that represents basically when the 21 like weekly exponential moving average crosses up through the 200-day moving average, which I have in blue. And that's been a really good indicator of buying and selling as well. Like I have like all this stuff written on a spreadsheet that sometimes I'll reference. Like basically that is undefeated outside of the double top that you see right there. And I kind of explained why the double top didn't really have much further to go. But like every other time it's had massive returns and been a great indicator of like a potential entry. And we basically have now, like I'm setting context for where we're at today. Like basically, if you extend this next line, I call this level 5, that white line level 5, like you have it there. These didn't exactly tap it, but on a high time frame, weekly bars, like that's pretty close. So I would still say like 1, 2, 3 in terms of like times it bounced.
Yeah.
And up here, December 2024, I would say 4, 5. You got kind of a double top there, slam back down. Then we came back up. And I would say 6, even though, again, that wasn't an exact touch when we were at like 112. It was close enough that I would count it. Like then it needed to go about $1,000 higher. And on the 7th try, after consolidating for 5 years in a very bullish pattern, I would say, I would call this like a macro, like inverted head and shoulders, or even like kind of resembles a cup and handle. It essentially pushed us up and pushed us through in July. So I've been really long, like Bitcoin. I mean, I'm always long Bitcoin basically, so whatever. But I've been long MSTR too since this, because I saw the macro kind of structure that pushed us up through it initially. But similar to 2017, like it slammed it back down. And on the linear chart, this resistance right here and this resistance right here, it may look random on the log chart, but on the linear chart, basically, it's just it's basically just if you connect the 2021, why does this look like it's in log scale? It's not supposed to be. There we go. Okay. So basically it just connects the 2017 top through the second, like I know we double topped in 2021, but there was like a nested double top within the double tops. So it went from 2017 top to 65.7K. And that line has basically just acted as resistance since then. So it makes a lot more sense on the linear chart that we did 1, 2, 3, and then 4. And I like how people get super bearish every time we're at this resistance line, as if like that resistance line is significant, of course, but this green line here represents 8 years of a price channel that contained 8 years of Bitcoin's price action, literally. Like that green channel is 8 years. This goes to 2017, 2021, 2020, 2021 double top. And then in 2025, we blew right through it. So I just don't get how like people with the straight face, if your brain can like handle a little bit of like nuance and context, like can be super bearish up here when like literally
there's nothing
1,
above
2,
it. Yeah.
3, 4. And if we go above that, yeah, we're going to explode. And this is on the linear chart. You can see it's going to explode on the linear chart, but it misses the context of on the log chart with everything I just shared with you. When you cross above these white lines, that's when you get the expectation of like, not just like, oh, we go from 120K to 170K or something, right? Like it's on a much larger appreciation. It's like, you're talking about Bitcoin like tripling. Like if Bitcoin only tripled, it would be the smallest return that we've ever seen in a log chart breakout.
So that kind of fits within like the Josh prophecy too, obviously with him predicting 444, and everybody thinks that's like ridiculous at the end, you know, in the middle of Q4. Is that what you're like, theoretically, if we were to go back above that 126 and into that kind of blue sky area, that's well within the 3x that you're talking about?
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, these inverted parabolas, like they kind of are misleading. Like essentially how they're not meant to be like price targets. They're just kind of guiding predictions of where price can go. But like I can delete them and just say like, we could very well go to 444 at the end of this cycle. Like I think that's well within reach. I had this hidden channel here. The one thing I wanted to mention about these channels is like the more price interacts with them, the more valid in my mind they become. So, and you can like debate on how they're meant to be drawn. Like you could definitely draw, there's different channels you can draw that support like Bitcoin legitimately going to like 10 million a coin. And I mean, I know that some people have that price prediction, but it's like, it is supported by the technicals at certain angles. And like, if you draw those channels, like we're literally right here with this price action at the bottom of the channel, which is like the best entry theoretically, you know, and it looks like we're about to explode off the bottom. But yeah, for this channel that I just switched from gray to green, like you're connecting the 2017 tops, 2020 tops, and then you're kind of connecting this bottom right here from December 2022. And it supports like a 444K Bitcoin. I can just duplicate previous price action here.
Yeah.
Like something like this, just kind of move it over, maybe adjust it for scale. And
that looks pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, basically like, and this is a log chart too. So while these may not, like it may look significantly like diminished in terms of the pixels on my monitor size of the move, but on the log scale, this is literally talking about going from 120 up to 444 right here. And this is October 2026.
That's wild. I think he predicted, was it November 8th or November 6th is the last that I saw, and he's still calling for it even with yesterday's move. So it's just crazy that you go through your analysis and that kind of fits.
You know what's funny is like I mean, obviously the shorter the time frame, the harder it's going to be to get there. Yeah, like I've gone through videos where I tried to establish like, is there a channel that can support that? And there are, but also it's just worth noting too, like if Bitcoin can do what it did yesterday, although I don't know, it's higher, like if everything when we're doing price predictions is a probability distribution, which that's what it is. I know that some people like just watch these videos and they're like binary thinkers. They're like,
yes or no. You're right or you're wrong. No. Yeah.
Right. But it's a probability distribution. It's like, if you can handle the concept of nuance, it's like, it is possible, but it's more likely that price will accelerate to the downside than to the upside, just given this is because again, like it's systems engineering. It's pigeonholing Bitcoin into the current financial system. And then you apply all the levers of the existing financial system denominated in USD, which is things like, we're going to trade with leverage. We're going to introduce the concept of derivatives. You know what I mean? And like, that is why you get explosive moves to the downside yesterday. But also, I guess you could say like derivatives, you know, people that are shorting Bitcoin through put options. Well, if they have to cover their shorts, they have to buy it back at some point to cover the short. And that puts explosive pressure to the upside for Bitcoin. And there's a guy named Darkside, I think, like Dark Side of the Moon or something.
I've seen him.
He's been on a couple of YouTube videos talking about like he calls it the inverse big short, because there is only a finite supply of Bitcoin. And if people are shorting it and they need to cover, even just as a hedge, you know, like that could create like basically an infinite short squeeze on Bitcoin, but also just to like nuance that I think that's why a company like MSTR exists, like Strategy exists. Because I think people will like long Bitcoin, short MSTR. There will always be MSTR shares available to cover your shorts. You're not going to create an infinite short squeeze there.
Interesting.
And I think that honestly, like that's kind of like a very like base level theory in my mind of like why MSTR will always have a role to play in this space. At least one reason.
Yeah, they've gotten to such size. You're talking about like the moat is so large and that they are like the Bitcoin company to basically be able to provide liquidity through share issuance.
Yeah, well, at least it because I mean, if Bitcoin ever hit an infinite short squeeze, like it could literally tank the entire global financial system, right? Like in theory, it could, as long as you're, because like you can't turn off Bitcoin, right? And
Right.
it trades 24/7, 365. So if it's illiquid and shorts need to cover, I mean, and you know, like we are digitized now, so you do get that concept of like forced selling, which was honestly best illustrated if we go into this chart and just kind of zoom in yesterday. Like this was not like people logging into Coinbase and selling their Bitcoin. Like if you tried to like transfer your Bitcoin to an exchange to like sell it yesterday, it probably would have like already sold off to, I mean, this on TradingView, it only has it going down to like 109, but
it was a 104, 105 or something like that, I think was the low.
Yeah, let me switch it to like BTC USDT. Yeah, so if you go to Bitcoin Tether instead of Bitcoin USD, it went all the way down to 102. So like you, by the time your Bitcoin was available to trade on an exchange, like it would have already been, the move would have already been down or been complete probably.
I think this is a good point to illustrate. You know, if you would have said this a year ago to people, and this is how our brains aren't hardwired to think in like a log scale or like that grade of change, that Bitcoin would crash in a year to 102 and a flash crash down from 120. And we were sitting at what, 60, 65,000 a year ago. Everybody would have been like, no way, you know?
Yeah.
But now today, everybody's kind of like freaking out, like, oh my gosh, you know, bear market. You just have to zoom out and like see where this could go.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know the future, so I'm always willing to admit that. But like, I don't know. Now it just looks like a megaphone pattern that tapped the bottom was a great entry, and now your target should be set on 138. In the next, I still think October is going to close like massively green. I believe if you go to like CoinGlass, and look at just the historic returns, like where is it down here? Like we've never had a green September that had a red October ever. You know what I mean? Like following a green September, October's returned 10.7%, 28.5%, 14.7, 33.5. Now, this is not technical analysis, so this isn't like me gambling my life savings away based on this, but like, because obviously things can change, but like, this is number one actually too. If I could just give like a piece of macro like investing advice, even though I'm not a financial advisor and it's not actually financial advice, like if you buy Bitcoin, then yesterday didn't bother you for real. Like you could have just deployed more capital to buy more Bitcoin. It's like basically that simple. It's when you like start pulling the traditional finance levers associated with crypto, like using leverage, using perps, you know what I mean? All this stuff that's just meant to make you go broke. And there were people I saw like that, there was like hundreds of people that lost millions of dollars in crypto yesterday.
It was
just on hyperliquid.
The largest liquidation event in history. It was bigger than Mt. Gox. It was bigger than FTX. It was bigger than anything. I think it was like over $9 billion. But that's the whole point. You hear everybody tell you don't go and take leverage. Just one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin. Like it really is an IQ test. Just buy it and hold it and don't play around. Just know what it's worth and let it work for you.
I know it's so simple. It's like, yo, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Well, it's like a bunch of these people that lost so much, like so many millions, like they made the millions doing the dumb stuff. And then it's like, now you gave it back doing dumb stuff. Like it was like, it was there and then it wasn't there, congrats.
Yeah. When they just should have been held, or at least held some, like lock in some of that and hold that as.
Let's hope they did.
I hope so. You'd like to think so. You want to pull up some strategy charts too? I was watching one of your more recent videos and you were talking about the peak in the .com bubble and how we're still testing. Was it 333?
Yeah, it was. Let me share this first. So
absolutely.
This is the Bitcoin to gold ratio on the weekly, because MSTR's price has basically been tracking. Let me see if I can add MSTR here. It's been tracking now this ratio for a while. Like if I zoom in.
Was this a comparison to gold chart?
Yeah, this is the Bitcoin to gold ratio. And it's been basically tracking. It's hard for me to get it to line up perfectly because when you zoom out, it like changes the scale and then they separate. I've seen some people kind of like drag and adjust it, but I don't know. My charts like auto adjust when I try to do that. But you can see it does basically track Bitcoin to gold, right? And somebody shared that basically a Flash on Twitter. If you follow Flash, like he does good TA.
I saw the exact same one you did, I think, where that wick follows. in gold,
Yeah,
right?
it was funny because he's basically said to like that was a separate chart, but he basically showed, I think it was like the gold price chart with like a 90-day lag or something. I don't know exactly what it was, but basically like this drop was in there somehow.
Yeah,
Just
that's
blew my
wild.
mind. And I saw another thing that said on the same day, maybe it was like 10 years ago, Bitcoin dropped like 50% as yesterday. It was
Wow.
like 10 years ago, same day. It was just insane stuff, man. Sometimes I think we live in a simulation, but we got to save that for the conspiracy episode.
That's right.
Yeah. But yeah, so MSTR, like basically, this is like not a great way of illustrating it because it only goes back to the end of 2024, but it started tracking the Bitcoin to gold ratio really closely sometime in 2023. The reason I share that is because now I want to share the Bitcoin to gold ratio, and I want to zoom out. I didn't want it to be on the weekly though. I want to be on the daily, I think. Why is it so hard to see? I wanted to kind of just show this little channel right there. Interesting. Sorry. Yeah, I wanted to show that little channel basically that kind of, did I adjust it or something? Or did I switch it out of the log scale? That's what it was. It was supposed to be in the log scale. Okay, here we go. Sorry, there we go. This channel right here on the bottom that you can see goes back to basically that's the inception of Bitcoin on TradingView. I'm pretty sure Bitcoin started before 2013, but as it relates to a TradingView right here, this channel is now kind of the support. It came into play right there, Bitcoin to gold ratio in the COVID sell-off, and it almost came into play yesterday, but ended up getting saved, I would say. So we don't need the cross channel, basically. What I'm saying is if we were to drop below there, the conversation in my mind actually changes. Then you need to start wondering, like, how low can this go if it was going to drop out of this channel? But it ended up holding at like a reading of 28. I guess it could have gone as low as 26 and needed to stop there. But at 25 or below, it's like something may have structurally like actually changed. So what I'm really trying to say is like if the Bitcoin to gold ratio is essentially helping guide our decisions on MSTR, then this to me looks as though it can turn around and be bullish for MSTR. This is the best like bullish case I have for MSTR. Like you can go to Twitter and get narratives about like the company itself and, you know, what role it has to play and dilution of shares and the MNAV and all that stuff. But it's like, you know, I really believe the MNAV is a function of sentiment. Like it expands when sentiment is positive, and literally you can go to Google Trends and type in MSTR and you can basically gauge retail sentiment that way, because that's representative of retail buyers.
It's just like Bitcoin,
Googling
right?
it. Yeah, literally, yes. So the higher the Google Trend data is for MSTR, the higher the MNAV. I mean, it's that simple, right? Like, why do we need to make it anything beyond that?
Well, it's kind of like when you go back, when I agree 100% with you about sentiment being, you know, the driver of MNAV. We've had evidence of this before with GBTC, right? When it actually basically had an MNAV below 1 at some point because of sentiment. Like, I don't think that's unrealistic to see that happen again, but I also could see it, when we do get into this crazy price action, when it does happen, that sentiment changing and obviously the MNAVs being driven.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just a function of like when people want their money to appreciate, right? They still look at it through USD lens.
Right.
So when MSTR is in more of like a bullish context, like it's going to attract more investment. But look at this. So it looks like a large kind of cup here. Maybe it's not like perfectly drawn or whatever. I'm just doing this on the fly. And then we could say that this looks a little bit like a handle here. That channel doesn't need to be fully extended, but right, we kind of see that. And if you ask me, like that could be basically saying an explosive move could be coming for strategy, or it's going to roll over and die. Like the biggest issue I've had with this whole trade, I call it like a proxy trade or the proxy trade, really. Like my guiding star for wanting to be in Bitcoin has been the log chart here. This log chart that has all of the, oops, that's Bitcoin USDT. The log chart here that has all the levels on it. So I use this as like really guiding my decision-making process. Like I think we're on the cusp of a breakout. We spent literally 3 months like chopping around the breakout zone. But it's also like, again, as a probability distribution, like even accounting for diminishing returns, let's say Bitcoin 3x's, so it goes to 350K, which would be, again, the smallest breakout
it's ever had. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, so let's say we're wrong and you lose like 20%, but you were going long Bitcoin right around this level. And you've never been wrong doing that ever in the past, right? It's literally, you've never gone wrong doing that. Okay, so I can sit through a 20% loss. This is just theoretical, right? And I'm not using leverage or anything like that. So I can like lose 20%, let's say, or let's just measure this candle and actually just give the actual number. Like, let's say I would have bought at the breakout level. So let's just measure from there to, yeah, you would have been down like what, 8.2%? And the upside is that you
could 3x.
see a 200%. Yeah, like I mean, it's absolutely insane to me.
That's a good risk to take. You know, that's the asymmetric
That's where my
bet.
head's at.
Yeah, that's what I try to paint to some people, especially other docs that don't really know what to do with their money, or like you said, they're sitting in a 5% CD. And I try to explain to them, like, we already think in terms of like reward and risk in healthcare. Like, are we going to do this procedure? Are we going to start this medication? What's the benefit to the patient versus what's the risk? So I try and paint it in that point of view. Like, would you take this theoretical 200, 300% gain at an 8% risk, of depreciation? Yes. Like the answer is 100 times out of 100 times.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's where I'm at. The biggest canary in the coal mine, though, has been for me that like maybe it won't happen is the MSTR stock, which it's just like it traded at 292 and closed there like 2 weeks ago. And then yesterday after hours, which I don't really count after hours. I don't have it on my charts and stuff. I'm hoping Monday it just opens higher. Like we'll see. I mean, it all depends. But like MSTR has just been a lot of repeating structures. It's best illustrated, I think, here by this chart. Where basically, like I can zoom in, this was early 2024. It had this base, and then when it explodes out of the base, like that's when you get the rapid appreciation. So it's kind of a signal similar to Bitcoin, where it's like, this is one way of looking at it on a linear chart. Honestly, MSTR looks better on the log chart, but again, this was late 2024, you base. And if you want to be like you could just trade MSTR when it breaks out of this base. Like if you're just a trader, you would just wait for it to break out of the base. And that's literally when like somebody on Twitter said MSTR makes all of its gains like less than 9% of the time, like 8.7% of the time.
Yeah, it's just like Bitcoin. What is it, like 10 trading days a year? I'm sure that it has its largest gains.
Yeah, and you can predict. That's what's so crazy is you can predict them. It's when people are like, "Oh, I'm too late." Often that like, no, that's like when the train is like leaving the station. Like, and I'm not saying that you should be like the, you know what I mean, the exit liquidity by buying something late. But that's why I like technical analysis, is because like it's kind of like saying like with the Bitcoin miners have been really strong. But would you rather buy like a late stage miner that's just like in that euphoric blow off top phase, or a miner that is about to break out of like a down channel, but is still below its 200-day? And it's like, well, honestly, you're probably going to get a rapid return, or you're going to be exit liquidity and suffer through like a 5% sell-off, buying a really explosive one like Iron at the top, and buying one like Fufu, FUFU, that's a funny ticker, actually, now that I say it out loud. That's like about to break out of its down channel, but it's still under the 200 days. So it's going to be like it's going to be like gradual. It's going to need weeks before it starts exploding higher, if it decides to, But yeah, so MSTR, I'm just looking. This is basically how I have it charted on the linear chart here. And I've just been having to constantly adjust the base of this parabola, because it's looked like it's needing more and more time, to do what it's going to do. I still think it's going to have an explosive move ahead of it. But what's crazy is like, it basically did have a fake breakout back in July where it broke above the base and it kind of exploded higher. And there was if I look at MSTR on the log chart here, there's actually like a signal. So we knew that it broke out because this chart here, those white lines, it's kind of interesting because you saw how like Bitcoin's breakouts are inclining white lines, but MSTR's breakout lines are actually declining. But there's still like great signal here. If you bought these breakouts, like back in 2020, you got a 900, like basically you got a 10x in 25 weeks. The next one that happened was, well, number one, there were fake outs along the way. You can kind of see it's faked out multiple times, like here, and then as recently as here. So all of those fake outs were brutal. But if you bought the real breakout later, you got, this was it actually started in late 2023, even though we probably think of it as the Q1 2024 breakout MSTR, but 450% return in 22 weeks. Another one here, late September 2024 to November, 238% in 9 weeks. And now look at where we are, like we basically have like a double fake out. That's what's so crazy. Like we had a breakout, slam back down. It looked like we were back above this past week. And ultimately though, and that's what I've been telling people, wait until we close, like look for the close confirmation. Now we actually did get a close above this level, but I was saying the 360 level on MSTR is very significant. Like I'm watching two main levels, $260 and 424 for the bull case. And like, until you see a close above 360, I would just be careful with going like irresponsibly long, options, anything like that. You can accumulate shares down here, but yeah, like that's been the thing. And you were talking about the .com bubble top. It's kind of crazy to think that like MSTR in 2025 is still below its .com bubble top right there.
Even after
All the way back here.
640,000 Bitcoin accumulated on the balance sheet in that time.
This is, to me though, like I just think MSTR has a role to play in the future of finance, if for no other reason than to be like the
Case study.
derivatives provider for
Yeah.
people that need like hedge funds that are long Bitcoin need to like also hedge against it. They're a hedge fund, they hedge. Like they'll short MSTR probably, if I had to guess, you know, or I guess you could say IBIT too, but IBIT's supposed to be correlated to Bitcoin, so maybe that wouldn't provide the same. I don't know, thinking out loud. But this is another interesting one. Going back to the IPO, like I'll switch to weekly. If you go back to their June 1998 IPO, like this is how much time I've spent in these charts. I noticed that there's another like kind of line of incline that are very relevant to MSTR's price action. If I was to walk through why that is, probably take another like 10, 15 minutes. So probably not worth it. Just take me at my word. But you can follow this IPO line, and you can see I've got other lines at that same angle. I'm just hiding them in gray. You can follow this out to today. And there's been a lot of like confluence around the IPO trend line kind of recently. So it's kind of interesting. You can see like some candles just wick like straight off of it to the top and the bottom side, or like the bodies of candles kind of interact with them. It's just kind of cool. Like that MSTR is still in a way connected to.
It's 27 years ago. Yeah. That's neat. Is there this is gonna be a tough question, but is there like a theoretical Bitcoin price above which we kind of see an MSTR breakout once Bitcoin crosses a certain amount, or kind of looking back on that Bitcoin gold pairing that you kind of think, okay, this could be it? Or are you just continuing to look at the trend line?
I mean, the MSTR has been like a little bit of an enigma, if you ask me. Like Bitcoin to gold ratio to me looks about ready to explode. One thing that I didn't bring up is the gold chart. Like if you go on the gold chart and then go to the monthly, like I don't know if gold has topped. Like if you give like really macro targets, it looks like you can go to like 4230, so 4,230 an ounce. So I mean, I don't know that gold has topped or not, but if you go to like the RSI, like gold's monthly RSI reading is literally the highest it's been in like 46 years, basically. Like if you go back to like 1979, gold looks like it should be topping soon, is basically what I'm saying. Like it looks like it should be topping soon. And when it tops, just like you see here in 1979, like you get a pretty rapid move down, you know? I'm not saying that I know the future. So, but once that happens, it skews the Bitcoin to gold ratio in Bitcoin's favor. And MSTR is just a derivative. Like currently to me, man, like I'm just keeping 100 with you. To me, MSTR, people want to talk about like narratives about the company and this and that, MNAV. And it's like, then you are a coincidence theorist again, you know? I mean, again, you are a coincidence theorist. It's like turning on the CNBC and believing what they tell you about MSTR. It's like, why? How do you explain that it's tracking the Bitcoin to gold ratio almost exact? You know, to me, it's as simple as when gold tops, this skews. I had another chart. It might just be easier to show you here.
Yeah.
This is like my little MSTR trading community. And once Bitcoin, I think I have it under charts actually. Once, okay, that's the thing that Flash shared, by the way. Like this is the MSTR to gold ratio. So also looking like it's, again, this was the previous pattern, and this is where we currently are, just playing that same pattern out over again. But where is it? Gold right here. So just referencing 2020, which was the last time there was a Bitcoin log chart breakout. Similar thing. This is gold on the monthly. The RSI reading got to like 85. So we're currently at like a 91.5, which is the highest since 1979. When gold topped in July 2020, and then it's not like there was even an explosive move down in gold, but it immediately flipped the Bitcoin to gold ratio, which is on this picture. It immediately flipped it, and it proceeded to, and this is weekly chart now, so that was monthly. This is weekly, just for time frame reference.
Yeah.
It immediately 7x. So this looks like the Bitcoin price. This is actually the Bitcoin to gold ratio. So it went from a 7 to a 35. And now think that this is literally MSTR's price right here. It's tracking this exact currently.
Why do you think that
and
is?
MSTR in this time frame, MSTR in this time frame 10x, by the way. Why do I think it is? Honestly, man, like this is true. Like if I don't know, I'll just say I don't know. Like the market maker algorithms, which by the way, to me, like the market maker, you know how you can go back in like time and kind of check how like things trade, and you can see that like there's fractals of the MSTR IPO trend line that goes back 27 years, and that's not just one line. I know they're in gray, but like I have these other lines of the exact same angle on this chart showing you that like they're very relevant. Like price reacts to these levels. to me, I was just going to make a point that like, I think AI has been around significantly longer than we're told. I think AI just became accessible to the public in 2022 or 2023. You know what I mean? And now that's the narrative that we think. But again, going back to like DARPA and how basically so many, if not all of the Magnificent Seven stocks have some root from DARPA, where they then they essentially are kingmakers, install a representative of their technology to the public. You know, when you go back to like GPS, you know, they just gave that to the public. There wasn't a company that we think back on and say like, oh yeah, the GPS company, you know, what a breakthrough in technology. It's like, no. That was like DARPA tech that was given to the public. And probably Google was the best at monetizing it. Well, Google also DARPA roots. Nobody would dispute that if you look into it. Like, to me, I think like they've probably had AI for a very long time. And at some point they were just like, okay, now when we release this technology to the public, that by the way, they pay for it through the dilution of dollars through black budget programs, which just means infinite budget, which means you will suffer any amount of pain that we decide you'll suffer. You know what I mean? Because these go forward at any cost and they're completely off the books. Basically now they got smart and they're like, why would we give this away for free? You know, let's use like InQtel and stuff like that to basically establish investment arms. And we profit now from the release of these technologies to the public via private companies that go public. Like, by the way, who's the most recent one? Do you know the most recent company that kind of did this, that saw just an absolute explosion in their price in the last like 2 years?
I don't know.
Palantir.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Another one of those, you know what I mean? It's just, there's no coincidence, man. There's no coincidence. And you want to know another one that I'm going to predict for the future that might be up your alley?
Medical wise, is that what you're getting at?
Yep.
What is it?
Ginkgo Bioworks, DNA.
Okay.
Also a sick chart, by the way, even though it's like catching a falling knife potentially, but like it's right up in that alley of, you know, it's got ties basically if you research like the background of that company. But we're getting off topic, but I just wanted to share that. In case anybody watches this like 5 years in the future.
Yeah. That's why we're posting it, right? That's a joke of why Chris and I partly made a podcast too, so we can at least tell the kids and grandkids one day, you know, like they weren't crazy. You know, mom said they were crazy.
I hope that my kids can see it that way, but I don't know, man. It's going to be a interesting world that they inherit from us, you know.
That's awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you going through all the technical analysis. I'm sure that was over my head to a large extent, so I'm sure it's over a lot of people. But it's nice to get that hopium, and you know, there's stuff in the background that we don't know about it. I think you just got to buckle in and hold on. I think.
If you zoom all the way out, like my favorite thing to say is that like you can't really fake things. Like the market maker algorithms that dictate price action of assets and equities.
Yeah.
And by the way, when there's a deviation from market makers doing their thing with like how things trade, which I mean, yesterday was the clearest example of when you get one of those like rare deviations. Another one might be like when you talk about like GameStop. You remember the GME explosion to like $500. Like when something deviates from the market maker control, like it's evident in the chart. And so that's why I wanted to talk to you about like the Bitcoin to gold ratio and that kind of falling knife, but it kind of stayed within that channel that was from inception to the COVID low to, so like it didn't violate something significant that would make me step back and question everything. Like, oh man, we might actually be wrong. Like it was contained, I would say. Where was I going with that? I just wanted to say that it's hard to fake like high time frame macro signals. And right now we're experiencing like in 2025, the confluence of quite like a lot, basically. This is why that's why I'm like willing to stick my neck out. You know what I mean? And like,
absolutely.
Like I don't want to be recognized in the streets when I go outside and like, you know what I mean? Like I don't want to be like responsible for people losing their life savings and stuff like that. Like I'm just showing that like, yo, I'm positioned like very aggressively, but again, no leverage, long this trade because there's just such a confluence of high time frame things that really can't be faked factors saying there is an explosive move coming to the upside or the downside. That's the thing. It could go either way in most cases, but then there's some signals that would strongly imply that it's going to be to the upside. Also for the base case of Bitcoin and its future, like its role in our future, you can't spend 5 years consolidating on one level, break through to the next level, and then get slammed back down for another year. Like that's where my brain kind of really struggles to cope with that. If Bitcoin is what we know it to be, that's the cool thing. It's open source technology. It is a technology. It derives its value from the Bitcoin network and the hash rate, all these things. Plus you're valued in like fiat currencies that are getting absolutely slaughtered. So I hate going back to the narratives, but to me, like those narratives have perfect confluence with high time frame factors that like all paint the same kind of picture to me in my mind that we will be right, even on the back of yesterday's massive liquidations, which by the way, when you remove leverage from the system, it essentially lets those degenerate traders like not win on like an exponential scale, you know, like that James Wynn guy on Twitter who made like basically 100 million, you know what I mean? Like people like him aren't supposed to win. you know?
Right.
So like now people like him aren't going to win if Bitcoin does what we thought it was going to do. So anyways, that's what I think comes next, but not financial advice. I could be wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of what I talk about too, about putting, you want to put your chips on the table. It's this whole idea. I think the moniker is like, I'd rather be optimistic and wrong than pessimistic and right. And that's how I look at Bitcoin, is like, I think it could theoretically improve all aspects of our life, and improve the whole monetary system from the ground up. I'd rather put my faith in that and put my money where my mouth is and believe in that and be wrong. Like you said, it could go to the downside than to, just buy into the system that's completely corrupt.
Dude, I feel the same way, man. We could Bitcoiners could probably chat forever about all these different things. Like I agree. Like I just don't like to support the system that I think is
wrong,
working against me and working against like my unborn kids and their kids. You know what I mean? Like
absolutely.
I want to have kids. I want them to have kids. Like I don't want to support the system that is literally like the figurative ball and chain around their ankle. We think of like words definitions in like the dictionary definition and what we're taught, but it's like there's definitely, like I think we're like monetary slaves. I know it's a strong word, but it's like, you know what I mean? Like if you can kind of expand your thoughts associated with like what that would mean today, the modern day, like 2025, we're slaves to $1 and we have no control over it. We don't know how many of them exist. It's a private ledger versus Bitcoin being a public ledger. It's like, and like you said, it's kind of like money is the root of all evil, basically. Like truly, it's the mechanism that allows people like my dad works at the Pentagon his whole career. Like, you know what I mean? Like he kind of just does what he needs to do, but like he's just a cog in that wheel of things that I don't think are making this world a better place personally. But anyways,
it's Jack Mallers kind of sums it up best, I think, when he goes, no man should work for what another man can print. Right. That's essentially, to me, the definition of slavery. If you can just make that thing out of nothing, completely devalues your time and your effort and your work. And Bitcoin fixes that. Well, I don't want to take too much of your time. I guess I'll leave it to one last question I want to ask you, just because obviously being a doc podcast, I get a lot of docs that I talk to that I try and get them into the Bitcoin space. And a lot of them don't want to go buy on an exchange and like cold storage. And I always advocate for that. I think everybody should have cold storage Bitcoin. I think that's the value of Bitcoin itself. And then, so I'll get them to buy, more readily buy into their retirement accounts, because a lot of times they'll just have funds sitting there that they're not doing anything with, or they'll have it in some kind of stock or like low yield ETF that they're, they don't really care about. If you were to talk, like come give a speech to some of the other docs that work with us, what's something that you would tell them investing wise? Like if you were in their position where they had excess funds that they wanted to put to work, what would you be putting it into right now?
I would say if you're not comfortable with the concept of like cold storage and you don't want to open up like a Coinbase account or something like that, just kind of dip your toes in with maybe like a recurring automated buy of IBIT, and you can set that up so that it executes on trading days, you know what I mean? And you don't have to think about it. Like you log in once, you set up a automated recurring buy, and you just understand that you're getting exposure to this asset class. Now that's a very traditional finance lens to look at it through.
Yeah.
But it's better than nothing. And what's cool, and this is what always kills me, is like everything that we talk about with regards to finance can be back tested. So like no one ever needs to be taken at their word. Like if you want to critique them, before you do, stop and like go look at the data because it's available. There's never been a bad time to be like dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin, period, the end. Like there isn't some other alpha asset class that's like outperforming Bitcoin, making Bitcoin a bad investment on a relative scale. Bitcoin's the investment that puts everything else to shame. It's literally the apex predator if you're just looking at this through a traditional finance lens.
Yeah. It's the hurdle rate, right? I think that's what I try and tell them, is like the best performing asset in the last 10 years. If you look at everything through a Bitcoin denominated lens, everything is going down to the right. If you look at everything in the S&P.
It's like, if you were doing it, you're happy you did it and you're like telling everybody about it. If you weren't doing it and you're skeptical today because what if, you're late or something, that's what I'm saying. Back test it. And in your mind, think I was DCAing this whole time, right? And to me, that's the same thing, and the people who are dollar cost averaging in probably aren't selling anyways. So it's basically the same. And I would just say too, like, if you do want to get into cold storage, like maybe you do that later, maybe you do it right away. I think there's 3 tiers. Number one, it's like by the way, you can dollar cost average into actual physical Bitcoin through like Cash App, through Robinhood,
even
through
River.
Coinbase. River, yeah, there's better options, but something you might already have on your phone like Cash App, you can set up a recurring buy. So it's not as hard to do as you may think. But like phase 1 to me would be like open a Coinbase account. You probably want to pay for Coinbase Pro just to reduce the fees if you're going to be doing those recurring buys, and then add like every security measure. So add like an authenticator, add a passkey. Trust me, you want to do that because like you could do nothing wrong. And like I've been SIM swap attacked, you know what I mean? But like I didn't have my Bitcoin on Coinbase, so it didn't matter. But like I've been SIM swapped where they literally call your cell phone provider, pretend to be you. They get your phone number and then they go after your assets. And yeah, so you just don't want to risk that. Like that was before I talked about this stuff online too. So it's just like,
Yeah,
they probably just
it's
like
out there.
hacked Coinbase and grabbed my email or something. Yeah. The second thing, if you don't mind, I would say like a ledger, little physical devices like that, even though they don't like actually physically store your Bitcoin, but it's like a physical device that's an extra security measure. That's a very user-friendly one, even though it's not. They started supporting coins other than Bitcoin, so I think they lost a lot of like Bitcoiner support. But like a ledger is a very user-friendly way of cold storaging your Bitcoin. So then you're removing it from the exchange. That's definitely a massive cool thing you can do. And then there's like actual like really cold storage, which you can get like a cold card. That's definitely like on the harder, like maybe that's like a more advanced thing to do. But you sit down on a Saturday morning on the weekend, give yourself like an hour or two, obviously test before you send big amounts, and then you're like really
locked in.
Cold storage,
Yeah.
Bitcoin locked in. Yeah, like you're there. You're a real Bitcoiner at that.
Yeah, I kind of do the same thing you suggested. I was just curious. I try to tell everybody to start with IBIT, especially if they're new, right? I think that's going to be the more traditional route as Bitcoin gets more adopted. People are going to go through the ETFs or go through some of these Bitcoin treasury companies. And then as you get exposure and get off zero, you start to feel the price appreciation, right, over those traditionally 4 years. And so you start to realize, oh, this is something worth holding. You pay more attention to it, you learn about it. And I think that's how people are going to get into the lens of like, I need to own actual Bitcoin. It's going to be kind of like reverse, right, than what it has been. At least that's where I see this going.
Yeah, and I think you just gradually, well, whether it's intentional, you increase your exposure relative to other hedges that you have against, the debasement of US dollars, which is, I know how not most people don't think of it that way. But that's how I'm just going to say it, because I think we should switch our brain into that.
Yeah.
But also, like, what was I going to say? Yeah, like, or just Bitcoin appreciates. You get these breakouts like the one I think we're about to experience going into the end of the year that I think extends through the second quarter of 2026 minimum. And the longer it takes, by the way, the higher it goes. But like, you get these rapid appreciations of Bitcoin. And then all of a sudden, whether you intended it to happen this way or not, it starts to represent the pie chart of your portfolio exposures. Like, it starts to represent a bigger and bigger slice, even if you didn't accelerate your purchases of Bitcoin. So that's the cool thing about it, man. It just ends up drawing more and more people in. And it's funny how everybody has like different stories, different price points. A lot of people buy and then sell and they get humbled, me included, right? Because my story had to do with researching Tether, but like, it's like I'm back in, you know what I mean? And ultimately what that ended up letting me do was acquire, and reduce my my average price. But that was also me understanding the asset class and being disciplined about making recurring purchases when it was in a bear market. But then you also dollar cost average because I think people are really about to get humbled. A lot of people are thinking that like, oh, but it just went from 15K to 125. Therefore, it has to retrace. It's like, that's not what the charts, hopefully I did a decent job illustrating that. That's not what the charts are saying at all.
Yeah, I think especially on like into this weekend and probably into next week, I can't tell you how many people are bearish now because of that. It looks like a back test to me, and like you said, we've never been in this awesome of a macroeconomic environment set up for Bitcoin to, not only hold value, but to continue to increase in value. So I'm still super bullish. I'm still telling people to buy and hold greater than 4 years,
Yeah, and I mean, come on, there's no better way to drive a sale than to show the Magic Internet Money original Bitcoin logo. I mean, who wouldn't get excited about that MS Paint?
I need that on a scrub cap, man.
I'll send this to you just if you want.
Yeah, I need to make a scrub cap with that because I've got a Bitcoin scrub cap, I've got a strategy scrub cap, but I need a Magic Internet Money scrub cap.
Nice.
All right, Ryan. Well, where can everybody find you? Appreciate you jumping on with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. My pleasure. I love talking Bitcoin. And it's Ryan Hogue on YouTube. I have 2 channels. One is like how to sell t-shirts and stuff and make passive income. And then I'm going to be the ultimate like Bitcoin, hopefully like winning story, because I sold a bunch of t-shirts, a lot of them Bitcoin related, roll the profits into Bitcoin and then see where that takes us, right? So the other channel is Ryan Hogue Investing.
Love it, man. We'll definitely have to have you back at some point for the conspiracy theorists episode, because that's one I'm sure that Chris and I could make go for hours.
Yeah, that would be great.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.